No other Nintendo system will ever top the 3DS for me. While it may have started out on the wrong foot, the handheld quickly gained a robust library of some of the finest games you could get your hands on at the time. I played my fair share growing up, however, the closure of the eShop earlier this year suddenly left most of the titles on the system that never got re-releases or ports lost, with official means of experiencing them not being preferable. And there were still plenty of games I never got to play. So basically, I've been telling you all this because I modded my 3DS. And over the past year or so, I've been spending a lot of time catching up on titles I previously missed out on, and bro, I'm so upset that I didn't get to grow up with some of these. I found some gems that I know younger me would have loved. As I was doing this though, I eventually remembered a game I'd heard about in passing. A game called Rhythm Thief. As the name implies, Rhythm Thief is a first-person shooter released on the 3DS back in 2012 during the system's early days. It's a hybrid of a rhythm minigame collection mixed in with the visual novel or point-and-click adventure elements in order to tell a more compelling narrative. It also takes place in France, which is going to be a lot more relevant when I actually talk about the story. Now, you might be wondering how I know anything about this niche little project that only 2 people care about nowadays, and the truth is, I've actually known about this game ever since it was first released. You see, the early 2010s was the heyday of the Countdown community, if you even have any idea as to what I'm talking about. And there were YouTubers who played way too much Elmo's Number Journey growing up. They did top 10 lists, and I know hearing that makes you think of Watch Mojo, but I assure you, actual human beings made these. Yeah, I know. And I guess I'm technically part of the same camp? I'm not going to jump down that rabbit hole right now, but they're noteworthy to me because it seemed like everyone who did countdowns had the same collective favorite games, such as Shadow of the Colossus, No More Heroes, Professor Layton, and our topic for today, Rhythm Thief, albeit to a lesser extent with him because he sucks! Anyway, I was kind of under the impression that this was some sort of hidden gem, so one day I was like, yeah, you know, I think I'll play it. And because I'm making a video about it, you know, shit went down. The game opens up on a bunch of security guards, or law enforcement, finding out that Napoleon Bonaparte's casket has been stolen by a group attempting to bring him back to life. Thank God this game doesn't take place in Germany. We cut to our protagonist, Raphael, who with his dog Fondue has been living on his own ever since his father left him the years prior. And who can blame him? If my son had glasses and was a ginger, I'd probably leave him too. Raphael lives a double life as Phantom R, a thief who steals famous art pieces and artifacts, and is constantly pursued by the police and Inspector Pertier. One night, Phantom R takes interest in a bracelet on display in the Louvre due to it sharing the same mark as a coin his father left with him. After borrowing it and making a getaway from law enforcement, he runs into a girl named Marie who happens to be carrying a violin with the very same mark on it. She's being tailed by Napoleon, who has seemingly been revived. Guess who's back? He demands the dragon crown from her, an artifact that has some sort of power that he hopes to use to conquer Paris. After Phantom Rizzler promptly kills a group of armed knights with his bare hands, he escapes with Marie, and the two set off to solve the mystery surrounding the dragon crown and how Raphael's father is connected to the bigger picture. Along the way, they try to figure out who Marie's true mother is, as she was abandoned at birth, and they meet other fun characters such as Jean-Francois, Marie's caretaker, and Charlie, Vergier's daughter, who tries to catch the Phantom like her father and gets fucking killed for attempting to do so. For now, I'm going to let the plot take the back seat, as it's not really the main focus of this video, though we'll get back to it eventually as there's still a bit to unpack. When you're not watching the story unfold, the game consists of a wide variety of rhythm minigames corresponding to the current situation you're in. You could be striking poses and hiding behind statues to avoid security in the Louvre, having an epic sword fight where your opponent tells you what he's going to do because he mistook you for a game journalist, playing the world's worst version of Punch-Out, or being a dog. It's very similar to Rhythm Heaven as opposed to your average rhythm game, and just like Rhythm Heaven, these games do occasionally get reused with new music and a higher difficulty, which I'm fine with. Though they may look simplistic, they clearly had to take a lot of time to make each one, and also I think most people would prefer it if this game wasn't 2 seconds long, and most of the time the repeats are better than the originals, so it all works out. Some of my favorites include the sword fights with Napoleon, because sword fighting is always badass regardless of how it's done, and the music accompanying the game captures the struggle of the fight really well. I also think the dancing ones are pretty decent, however, nailing the timing on the spins is rather iffy. In comparison to pressing a button or swiping the touchscreen in a certain direction, drawing a circle in time to the beat is like trying to fart at a funeral without anybody noticing. Something really weird about the timing in this game is the circles that indicate when you're supposed to input whatever command the game requires. Now excuse me, but my Owen Don brain rot has taught me that you're supposed to input a note push whenever the ring lines up with the marker, but this game isn't awesome. This is Rhythm Thief. You can make the input before the ring noticeably lines up with the circle, and it'll still count it as a perfect. Meanwhile, inputting the command while the ring is lined up with the marker is bordering on inputting it way too late. I felt like this was at its worst in the Chef game, as not only does it take a little while to get used to the rules of the game, but I also would miss notes that I thought I was hitting spot on and getting thrown off. It's a decent game after that, but I feel like that this song is a great disservice to some of the other Chef-related music we have out there. That's an issue with some of the other songs as well. You're provided with a very brief tutorial on how a game works on the bottom screen, but seeing images and inputs doesn't directly tell you how to play. And during my first 2 attempts on the violin game, I lost immediately because I got the inputs backwards and was swiping in the wrong direction. And then I realized, oh, you play the violin game like an actual violin. Who would have guessed? I'm mostly to blame for that, and also it was a lot more funny than anything seeing Marie unable to play a basic note and then giving up on life. But then there's the glider minigame. I went in for a doctor's appointment the other day and he told me that I had AIDS. Of course, he was confused as to how I got it, but then I told him I played the glider game in Rhythm Thief and the Emperor's Treasure, and all of a sudden it all made sense. So this game uses the 3DS's freaking gyroscope, and what you have to do is aim at the knights and press the A button when the circle and the reticle overlap. Sounds pretty simple if you throw out the part where I mentioned gyro controls, but during both my first playthrough and when I revisited the game for this video, I didn't have any clue as to how this worked. The beats typically come in pairs of 2, but I would completely miss one yet get a perfect on the other, which made it unclear as to what I was doing wrong and what I was doing right. Not helping is that they shoot missiles at you, which would distract me thinking that I was trying to shoot those down rather than the knights, but no, when you shoot a knight down, the missile they fired completely loses track of you for no reason. On top of all of that confusion, you have to get accustomed to the gyro controls to aim your shots, which the 3DS is infamously bad with, and this is no exception. It ultimately leads to an uncomfortable and confusing mess of a minigame that isn't fun even after you figure out how it works. And back to the gyro thing, this game likes to make the most out of every feature of the 3DS to expand on the variety of levels. And look, most of the games with button or stylus inputs are perfectly fine, but while it may have sounded appealing to include gyroscope minigames on paper, there's a certain point where the devs should have just been told no. Fondue has a minigame where you're trying to catch meat and avoid other trash that Raphael is throwing at his pet for some reason. What is wrong with you? It sounds all well and good, but as soon as you start it, you get a note saying that this game will use the 3DS's gyroscope features, and let me tell you, that was one of the most terrifying things I've read in my entire life. You have to tilt the system to make Fondue move from one of 3 positions, and I wish I was making this up. Not only is it unresponsive at times, but also by tilting the system, it can be difficult for me to even see where the next piece of meat is coming from. And by the time I realize where it is, the jank motion controls prevent me from reaching it in time. Fondue might just be one of the weakest dogs in all of gaming. Bro ain't got shit on Puma. The Butler Punch-Out minigame has gyro when it could have just used buttons, and it would have been way better, though I guess that same sentiment applies to literally every other gyro game. Essentially, what I'm trying to say is that rhythm games should strive to be like this, and not this. One more, this one where you play as Vergier shooting down knights doesn't use the gyro sensor, but instead the L and R buttons, and I felt it deserved a mention. Now, I don't know if it's my 3DS model, but the latter half of the game gets ridiculous with the inputs you're required to make. Rhythm Thief taught me that the 3DS's triggers were not made for mashing, and this game in particular has a lot of that. On top of that, it gets way too difficult to try and remember the pattern of the knights coming at you. There are so many circles on both sides that they aren't helpful when it comes to nailing the timing on your inputs. Not as bad as the other duds, but it still could have been executed better in my opinion. Sad part is that even without these blunders, the game wouldn't have that strong of a lineup. Most of the games are pretty decent, but very few actually stand out. It's like Rhythm Heaven, but if Karate Joe was HIV positive. Unfortunately, the bad games are the most memorable of the bunch for how garbage they are, which for the longest time gave me the impression that most of this game's track lineup is bad, but that's not the case at all. I'd say I dislike liked 30% of the games, 60% I thought were okay or decent, and 10% are really fun. There's a neat Samba de Amigo homage, another rhythm series from Sega, that yes, it uses gyro a few times also, but in a very unobtrusive and responsive way. It's a really cool bit. I have a strong appreciation for that series ever since the new one included TikTok from Kesha. The Louvre game is fun and also noteworthy because the song accompanying it is the most popular in the game by a landslide. Somebody made a cursed edit a few years ago that picked up a lot of traction for some reason. I think this song was in the demo for the game, which I imagine was most people's first and only exposure to an otherwise niche title. And this random video must have sparked some global nostalgia trigger. I wonder if this attention gave the game a random sales spike around this time period. That would be pretty funny. The sword fighting game was fun as well, like I mentioned earlier, but one of my favorites is a repeat of the dancing game, Cheering Marie. For context for the moment when this comes up in the story, early on Marie is convinced her true mother is Queen Elizabeth, a natural thought we've all had at one point, but when she goes to meet her, she says, "No." And then Marie is all like, "There's no reason for me to live." Then Phantom R goes to find her, and then he says,
"The cool thing is, when you do it right, you get the angels."
And I have no idea what the hell that means, but hey, the song after that scene is really sweet and fun. It's got that Sega-ass vibe of infectious yet genuine optimism. Sometimes I boot up the game for this level alone.
I will ask of you to see you smile again. We'll bring us sunny days to see you laugh again.
With all that mentioned, I think it's time we move on to the other facets of gameplay on offer. When you're not running away from the police or having the misfortune of playing the glider minigame in a car, you explore the overworld of Paris akin to a point-and-click adventure game. The main purpose of these segments is to give you a break from gameplay and continue the plot. You can interact with NPCs with uninteresting dialogue and touch certain parts of the environment to find coins that can be exchanged for bonus goodies, like viewable cutscenes and songs or temporary power-ups to make the rhythm games easier to get a better rank on and increase their difficulty. There's also this recurring puzzle utilizing a sound recorder. At certain points in the story, you'll need to record a relevant sound and play it on a specific screen in order to progress. And let me tell you, if you've ever felt like your existence is pointless and that you have no meaning in life, then playing this game will make you reconsider that thought. The sounds you have to play are incredibly obvious and typically located in an area adjacent to the screen you have to play it on. So all these roadblocks do is make you take an unneeded detour that doesn't test my sweaty rhythm skills or puzzle solving abilities, and rather my patience. And no, I'm not asking for them to make the sounds harder to find, because then that'd just make the whole process even more tedious. I'm just saying these straight up shouldn't be in the game. I really do think nothing of value would be lost if these were cut. Sometimes they have you do actual puzzles, which are also pitifully easy and hardly of any note, but at least I can understand the point of these to some extent. But that still doesn't make them not seem like a rejected Professor Layton puzzle. Hey, wait a minute. I don't want to be that guy, but this game kinda similar to Professor Layton. The point-and-click style is the exact same thing Layton does, and if you replace the rhythm games with puzzles, then you have a very familiar gameplay loop. Heck, stylistically speaking, they're similar. They both have anime-esque cutscenes, and we all know that Layton invented those. And also, if you really think about it, when was the first Layton game? 2007. And when was music invented? That's right, 2007, because Professor Layton invented music. And guess what game has music written all over it? Holy shit. Let's also not forget that human trafficking originated from Professor Layton. And you know what other game just so happens to participate in human trafficking? Now look, if you think I'm about to sit here and unironically tell you that this is a Layton ripoff, then oh boy, you're right on the money. Okay, well there's some very, very obvious Layton influence going on here, I don't really mind. Yeah, now if some rando on Twitter posts an image of this video's thumbnail and title without actually having watched it in an attempt to make me look like a fool, you can reply to their tweet with this clip. I have successfully gaslit you. I mean, how could I resist? The title was just too funny. But in all seriousness, I think it's dumb to get pissy over one video game being similar to another unless if it begins to border on outright plagiarism, because each game can offer completely different experiences regardless of whether or not it's similar to another one or built off of the same idea. If you couldn't tell, I used to be a Yokai Watch fan. I would love to have a series similar to Layton that substitutes puzzles for other types of gameplay such as rhythm games. That Laytonless void in my heart desperately needs to be filled, and the professor has been dead forever, and Yeah, I guess he's back and better than ever now, but still, my point still stands. The real question is whether or not Rhythm Thief can capture the same as P.O.'s Layton and be a worthwhile video game on its own terms. No. Well, I mean, it could have been. The reason why Layton's point-and-click gameplay works is because the environments you explore are more detailed and interesting. You get to explore strange towns full of mystery, dark castles, a threatening future version of London, and various ruins straight out of an adventure movie. In Rhythm Thief, you get to walk around France, and let me ask you something. Who in their right mind would willingly go to France? It's a completely normal setting that's been used countless times in various other pieces of fiction, and I don't know about you, but to me, the setting has become incredibly dull as a result of that. You know, Layton's Mystery Journey had the same issue, except this time it takes place in Britain, and that's even worse! Look at all these tired set pieces, isn't that cool? Isn't that cool that this place you can see in real life is in a video game? Man, let me tell you about Layton's Mystery Journey. What a garbage, dookie-ass video game. Not helping is the boring, unnecessary gameplay during exploration that only serves to pad out the runtime, and even then, the game only clocks in at 5 hours. But let me tell you, those were some of the slowest 5 hours of my entire life. Instead of breaking the pace of the game with hollow puzzles, I wish they dedicated more work into improving the rhythm games and making more of them. Because even when you get back to the real game, there's still a 30% chance that the level you're about to play sucks platypus nuts. So then you get to go back and do more boring exploration, and the whole process repeats itself for a few more hours until next thing you know, it's over. And you only spent a portion of that runtime doing the game's namesake. Professor Layton is fun outside of the puzzles because there are more compelling mysteries to solve in each game. There are mini games to play when you need a break from the standard puzzles. I know some of you diehard Rhythm Thief fans are probably getting sick of the comparison, but this really is Professor Layton at home. At home, food can still taste good if you prepare it right, but there's nothing quite as refreshing as a good restaurant visit when you're starving and just want to sit and take in a nice atmosphere and meal. Don't ask me why I just wrote this analogy. Revisiting this game provided me some clarity as to why I was so unengaged while playing, because when you're just picking and choosing the songs you want to play from the song list, it's admittedly a little bit fun. Sometimes janky, and a good chunk of the songs are misses, but there's enjoyment to be found here. When you're not doing that, though, it's a boring slog from each major plot beat to another, and I mean, it's not even like the plot itself is terrible or anything, but getting there is a whole nother story. It's like walking through the perfume aisle at the mall in order to get to the Taco Bell on the other side. But then you go inside of the Taco Bell and it's not Taco Bell, it's your own house, but your mom is trying to make Taco Bell food and it sucks! Speaking of which, let's get back to that plot. Apologies in advance, but I'm going to try to talk about this in a quick manner, so forgive me if I mess up any details regarding this cinematic masterpiece. Also spoilers, obviously. Let's go to where we last left off. Phantomar and Marie find the Dragon Crown in Notre Dame and repeatedly evade Napoleon. Phantomar continues looking into Napoleon, the Dragon Crown, and the disappearance of his father, who he believes may be working with Napoleon. And like I mentioned earlier, while they're at the Paris Opera, Marie sees Queen Elizabeth and asks her if she's her mother, and well, you know what happens next. Marie is invited to perform in an orchestra in Versailles, but whenever the two visit the place, they encounter Napoleon again, who takes Marie hostage in exchange for the Dragon Crown. Convincing his rival, Vergier's daughter Charlie, to assist him, Phantomar meets Napoleon on the Eiffel Tower to tell you that yes, this game does in fact take place in France. He hands Napoleon a fake crown rigged with a gas trap, but as he makes his escape, Jean-Francois shows up. If you remember him, you know, he was the guy who took care of Marie or something. He fucking shoots Phantomar.
Phantomar!
Marie doesn't sound very concerned about the whole ordeal, and I don't blame her, because he just kinda walks it off moments later. Anyway, Francois has been working with Napoleon the whole time because he wants France to prosper under a strong ruler once more. Like I said, this game would be comedy gold if it took place in Germany.
I see good things about Hitler also.
Francois and Napoleon now have the crown, which is actually a key to something, and they decide to keep Marie, but with some help from Charlie, they're all like, "So long, Jean-Francois," and Phantomar manages to live another day. Unfortunately. Napoleon forces Marie to play the Moon Princess song on her violin, or else he'll kill Queen Elizabeth. And you'll never guess this, but she was actually Marie's mother the whole time and only said otherwise to protect her. And with this newfound information, Marie is all like,
I didn't know that. You're telling me now for the first time.
Can I just say that the voice acting in this game is so weak? The direction the actors are given is terrible. Most of the time, it sounds like they weren't even told the context behind the the lines they're reading, which really takes a lot of the piss out of key story moments.
Where are you going? Don't leave me!
I am nothing but a stranger to you, little girl. Please, do not torture yourself on my account.
At the very least, the villains do a fine job, and Jean-Francois in particular sounds like he's having a fun time.
It is a pity, but now that I know that she is the key, how could I release her? Still, I suppose I should give you something. How about a little lead?
Anyway, in a moment that's so important that they don't even show it happening on screen, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon emerge from somewhere, I guess. This is the one time in the game where a real-world influence actually benefited it a lot. Nobody knows if the Hanging Gardens actually existed or not, but I think that's awesome that the game actually taught me about something I'd never heard about before. Napoleon plans to use the gardens as a weapon to destroy France and build a new empire. Phantomar invades the place and along the way has a showdown with Jean-Francois. And let me tell you straight up, this is the best level in the whole game. The animations are sick, the music is fast-paced and kick-ass, and there are no stupid gimmicks, just swipe directions to the rhythm. It goes hard, but isn't very hard. However, every aspect of it is so well put together that I'm upset this is the only iteration of this game we got. Phantomar has one final sword fight with Napoleon, and after his loss, he explains that he's actually just a random guy named Leonard, and that he wasn't actually Napoleon, he was just pretending to be. Like I said, I wish this game took place in Germany! He was just a stand-in while the real Napoleon's body was being revived, but he decides to go ahead and die, and Phantomar and Marie stop the gardens with the power of friendship, or something along those lines. The next day, everyone celebrates Fête de Paris, I'm pretty sure that's how it's pronounced, and the two share their goodbyes.
Au revoir, Raphael.
Au revoir, Piccadilly! Pardon my French. In a post-credits scene, we get to see the real Napoleon alongside Phantomar's father, who prepares for the next part of their plan, ending the game on a cliffhanger that never got followed up on. And I know I've been dogging on this game throughout this whole video, but would you be surprised if I told you that I'm just as upset as every other fan of this game that it never got a sequel? Yeah, I'm not that cynical, not yet anyway. Sure, I didn't really like it that much. There were some bad rhythm games, mind-numbing exploration, and an okay story with lackluster presentation, but those are the exact reasons why I would have loved there to be a sequel. There's so much room for improvement, and if we got another game that polished up those weaker aspects some more, it probably would have been a solid rhythm game. I would love there to be another series similar to Layton, because we just don't have enough of those types of games out there. It could have thrived during that series' dormant years. The game got decent review scores, and I commonly see it being praised as a hidden gem of the 3DS's library. Did it just not sell well enough or something? An iOS spin-off / port was released in 2014, but after that, Rhythm Thief just sort of disappeared. It's almost never mentioned anywhere. The only representation the game has gotten in the past several years is the main theme being in the new Samba de Amigo game. Rhythm Thief fans aren't even starving, they're straight up dead at this point. And there's nothing that sucks quite as much as seeing a game with so much untapped potential never get the chance to reach its peak. Regardless of its quality, I believe the game had a lot of heart and soul put into it, and I think we can all agree that it's a shame it got left in the dust to be forgotten. There's a reason why there are people out there that still love it. At the very least, even if it did get forgotten, even if it never got a proper sequel, even if it wasn't that great, it was still a better Layton game than Layton's Mystery Journey.